and welcome to Ticket Manager's All Access interview series, engaging leaders from across the sports marketing spectrum to identify and explore critical issues in the business of sports, entertainment, sponsorship, activation, ticketing, hospitality, and even more. I'm your host, Jim Andrews, and joining me on this episode is Jason Andrea, Chief Revenue Officer for the Las Vegas Aces of the WNBA. Jason, it's great to see you, and just thanks so much for joining the podcast.
My pleasure, Jim. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm really happy to have you as a guest because you occupy a really interesting role in our business. You're with an organization that has won back-to-back championships. You're in a market that is unlike any other at an unprecedented time for not only your league, but women's professional sports in general. So we have a lot to talk about. And I want to start out just by asking about your experiences thus far with the Aces over the past 2+ years. Because as someone who has previously worked for NFL and NHL teams, among other organizations, in your experience, what are some of the biggest differences, maybe some of the biggest challenges, as well as opportunities in selling for a women's pro sports franchise?
Yeah, no, I mean, Jim, I've had the experience of being in the men's sports world up until coming here to the Las Vegas Aces. And really, the trajectory of women's sports is kind of what I latched onto before starting here. And lucky enough for me, or however we like to say it, I got to work for challenger brands in the past. So I understood what women's sports has been before and see what it should be in the future. And I think it's very telling of where sports is going when you're seeing the inclusion of everybody being involved, and you're seeing women's sports become what it should have been, 15, 20 years ago. But you're also seeing the time and effort from a lot of different people within sports, the brands within sports, but just people's time continuous to grow. And I think that's really the next evolution, as of course you're seeing that now with TV numbers, et cetera, going up. And the biggest change from being at an NHL or an NFL franchise is the meetings, right? When it comes from a partnership side of things. When you're in an NFL franchise, it's easy to get the meeting. You have to essentially quantify the dollar figure from what a partnership is going to look like. From the WNBA, it's once you get somebody introduced to the product and get the meeting, it's not hard to then convince them of what and why it is worthy of an investment. It's much more of convincing them of the product at the beginning. So it's kind of a different change of the conversation of what that piece looks like, and kind of, getting them introduced to just the product as a whole. What I would say is the easiest way to do that is to have somebody come to a game. I think it definitely opens up their eyes of the experience, and definitely what separates women's sports and kind of the growth model and kind of the engagement of the fan base as a whole, and what they see on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Jason. Just to think about that from the prospecting and the getting those folks in, to have those initial conversations really takes on a lot more importance in that realm. I hadn't thought of it that way, but that makes a lot of sense. There were, I think, many people who were kind of surprised that as the Aces were having such great success on the court over the last few years, that you remained without a jersey patch sponsor until this year, and the agreement that has now put Ally Financial on the jerseys. Can you talk a little bit about the approach that the team took to finding a jersey partner?
Yeah, I think that was definitely a top-down mentality, from ownership to leadership to everybody involved. It was really finding the right partner with the right mindset. I'll give Ally a lot of credit. They're on their journey of splitting marketing from 50-50. Right, from a men's and women's perspective. And I think they were absolutely the right partner for us. And we had been kind of on the journey to, as you mentioned, to really find the like-minded partner that realized we are trying to change the trajectory of women's sports. And I think we're all in this together. And we wanted to find someone that was in this, plan, in this, journey with us. And they are absolutely the right partner. They've been fantastic to work with. And we can't, wait to see what else happens next. We just got to see Asia Wilson on the cover of the new 2K game, and Ally is on there with us. So we have a lot of pride in working with them, and I believe they have a lot of pride in working for us. And we're just excited for what the next few years have to offer.
with something like that, the extra or additional exposure that something like being on the cover brings, is that something that is part of the conversation, or when you're talking to a prospective partner, before they sign, that's these are the kind of opportunities that could come along with being on the jersey, or is that risking kind of over promising when you're doing that kind of having that kind of conversation?
I mean, we're lucky enough, right? We're in Las Vegas. So when it comes to earned media, there's a lot that kind of happens from our jersey perspective. So we don't really talk about too much. There's just other opportunities that have happened in the past, whether it ends up on, a different broadcast, when it ends up on ESPN, it ends up, in coverage for the finals, et cetera. It's really all encompassing. So anything that happens from that perspective is all earned media on that side of things. And it's really just the added bonus to us working together and the opportunities that come from there. I mean, nothing like this we could ever promise. Now, I'm pleasantly surprised and very happy that Asia was able to make it onto the cover, and along with Jason Tatum, it's a great mix of this past championships,
Yeah, absolutely.
and it really puts Ally front and center, which I'm ecstatic for. But no, this is something that we could never talk about prior.
Well, and you just mentioned something that I wanted to touch on, and that is your location. Clearly Vegas is a unique place in many ways. I've talked to other folks with some of the other teams and organizations in the city on this podcast. And there's just, first of all, just the sheer amount of sponsorable properties between the teams, venues, events going on. I would love to just hear from your perspective. How does that impact kind of the overall sales approach? Whether we're talking about brand partnerships, season ticket sales, single games, merchandise, all of that kind of stuff. How do you compete in such a vibrant and crowded marketplace?
I would say we're lucky enough, and we have an incredible staff. And I think I'll give a lot of credit to the marketing side of our business, the community side of our business, and the ticketing side of our business. We really kind of put ourselves on the map from a local, regional level. We've really embraced, I think the city truly has embraced us from that perspective. We were at 1,500 season seats just 3 years ago, and now we've sold out from a season seat perspective. And I
Amazing.
think the only way that you can do that is by really embodying the city and the city embodying you back. When we had 30, 40,000 people celebrate on the strip of Las Vegas when we won the first title for the city of Las Vegas, I think that kind of hit home. I think for us, I know we kind of set the stage for that day, and then we drove our cars back to go park in the parking lot. And I think a lot of us turned to each other and said, there wasn't anybody there. Like, we're nervous of kind of what this is going to end up looking like. And then when we end up being on the buses and turning the corner, I think all of us not really shed a tear, but got truly emotional and excited because you got to see that it was locals, right? Because they all
Right.
knew to stay inside the casinos and then head out towards the strip to be able to see it all because it was so hot, right? It was still September, so it was still very warm. But that's not normal, right? From a WNBA, but to see all of that, to see that excitement, to see the belief, and I think it's really helped just become one with the city to where we're that event that happens 20 times a year plus playoffs, where the locals are actually coming, and it's coming in waves and coming in droves. And we actually have parking issues when it comes to getting into our building. Get there early because it can get backed up at times. That just shows you the amount of devotion and desire from our fan base to get there and to watch it. It's just absolutely fantastic. And I will absolutely take the hat off to from a marketing and community standpoint, which turns into ticketing side the same way.
Clearly, 2024, this season for the WNBA, the storylines are unprecedented. The arrival of the rookies like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and others, they have helped obviously bring a lot more attention to the league, and it's especially exciting when they go up against the stars like Asia Wilson and the other players on the Aces, and they visit these markets. How in general has this new level of interest impacted your planning and your discussions with your current partners and prospects?
I'll give our ticketing staff a lot of credit. We were a little bit of ahead of the curve when it came from filling our building, and I think the media exposure just helps that even greater. We were on pace to be sold out from a season ticket perspective, and we sold out across the season. And then when she announced, that just kind of sped up the process for us, and I think it really helped others in our industry when you have this new class going and becoming drafted. And I think the over 2 million views from a draft perspective versus what it has been in the past, I think those extra eyeballs are fantastic for the game at a wonderful time. Like for me, it's fantastic to see the Asia Wilsons, the Breonna Stewarts, the Jewel Lloyds, the Kelsey Plums, Chelsea Grays, Jackie Youngs be able to be seen by more people now.
Finally,
Right.
yeah.
I mean, to me, the more exposure, the better, because you are truly seeing how great this game is, and you're seeing it in its best. Right. I mean, obviously, it's been 28 years in existence, but now is the best basketball that's been played, and it's absolutely fantastic on the court. And I'm so overjoyed that more people are able to see it because now more eyeballs are being brought to it. Now, when it comes to capitalize on that from a revenue perspective, I think for us, we've done a great job from a ticketing side of things. It really just more fortified what we are doing on that side of the house. From a partnership standpoint, it really just adds value to the conversations we're already currently having and the ones that we are the partners that we already currently have at the same time. We've had a couple of partners that jumped on board early when I came on board here at the Aces, and since we've had additional staff, they came on whether it was last year or before this year started, and they're really seeing the effects and the aftermath of all of the viewership numbers that have come to be, and they overjoyed from that perspective. And that's really how you continue to grow from a partnership side of things, is really adding on is from those partners talking about it and those partners being about it, and just kind of seeing what the change can be from somebody else and kind of using as an example for others that we have conversations with.
Yeah, I mean, and that's so important, right? We talk a lot about, I know I do, and I'm talking to brands about, getting in on the ground floor and kind of, you play that game. There may be a little bit more of a risk associated with kind of like getting in early, quote unquote, early. But boy, the payout when something, really breaks like this, you're so glad you're there. You're just reaping the benefits of being kind of a pioneer, or whatever the term you want to put on it. So clearly that's happening with a lot of your partners and other league partners who've been around for a while, not just kind of showing up now and saying, "Hey, what's going on? Let's let's jump in." But
And I think the best part of that too is it's also helped swing some of the brands that were on the fence
sure,
of, is this truly something that is a market resource for us? And I think it's been overwhelmingly yes. And I think that's really been I don't know if it's the extra kicker or whatever however we want to call it, but maybe it's been more eye opening, I think, to most, is just, yes, this is a true platform, and yes, this does deserve, you know, equal time, right? And
yeah.
equal thought when it comes from that perspective.
Jason, are you also hearing kind of a shift in some of the conversations, or seeing a shift with, I think, even just 3 4 years ago, a lot of the conversation around women's sports sponsorships was, well, if I'm a brand, well, I want to do this because it's the right thing to do. I want to be, supportive of, equality and equity and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes what was left out of there was, this is a great business opportunity. This is a chance for you to, sell more product, or, do, hit some of those bottom line business objectives, as well as, yeah, of course, doing the right thing. Do you see more of the brands kind of coming in with maybe that more of a putting a business lens on this first, rather than it's just a good thing to do?
100%. I mean, I think Ally echoes that through and through. Right? I mean, they saw the amount of impact that we can have working together, and I think that has changed, the outlook of a lot of different other partners that we work with now, and even ones that came on board 2 years ago. Like, I think they realized very early on that this is an actual platform that we should invest in, and not just, hey, here to check a box kind of style. And I
Right.
think our organization has done a very good job of kind of setting the bar and holding a firm line when it comes to what investments should look like within women's sports, but then also the why at the same time. Right? Like, you can always say, hey, this is where we need to be, but if you don't back it up in some way, shape, or form, you really don't have that leg to stand on. Where I think we've done a very good job of is really showing them the effects and the impact that working with us can have, and working in women's sports can have, working other teams in the W can have, and really kind of making sure that we set that bar so that we can continue to move this business forward, instead of kind of checking the box with some of the brands maybe potentially in the past before I got here.
I wanted to talk about the fact that you've spent more than a dozen years, I believe, securing partnerships, and talked about your background there. But last year, you expanded your responsibilities. You were named the CRO there for the Aces, and knowing that a lot of the listeners to this podcast are on or hope to be on a similar track. They may be in partnership sales right now, but looking to kind of expand their responsibilities. What advice would you have for folks who want to someday sit in a CRO seat and have to have that responsibility for all of the different pieces of the revenue pie?
I mean, to me, it's always be curious. I think that's really helped me, just myself, but I know it's helped a lot of my other coworkers and other people that I've worked with in the past. Is really be curious, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask a question where you might not know the answer. Don't assume anything. And I think that's really been helpful. And maybe it's not just the ticketing side, but it's also from a partnership standpoint. Everybody in the partnership team gets to interact with everybody across the business, right? Because inside of a partnership, you'll have stuff that has marketing, community, social media, even the actual sports side potentially, right? So like there's a bunch of different ways where you interact within the organization, and always just ask questions, be curious, willing to learn. And the second piece is learn the strategy aspect. I think that's very big of, not only from a partner side of how you go to market, who you attack, how you attack, kind of from a prospecting perspective is what I'm talking about. But then also on the ticketing side of things, what does that strategy look like, right? Like, how do we fill a building? How do we get more people involved? How do you, grow demand? Like, there's a bunch of different ways to kind of think through strategically how that works. And I'm lucky enough to work with the team here. They've, I think, what's also helped us is a lot of the folks here have come from different organizations. And when you come from different organizations within sports with WNBA franchise, we've kind of built this place on this is where you can come to have significant success, not where you come to jump off and go somewhere else.
Right.
So I think that's really been influential for me is learning at the same time. We have two vice presidents of ticketing here with us, and both of them have very much taught me at the same time as we kind of work on this path together and kind of filling the building. And they've done a phenomenal job of leading the team. And I just kind of get to jump on that bandwagon, which is fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. And it's that's a whole nother conversation to be had about kind of building a sales culture, a new business culture. It sounds like you're well on your way to creating something great there in Las Vegas. And but before I let you go, Jason, just like to ask: is there anything in particular that's coming up for you and the Aces in terms of what's next? Whether that's certain categories you might be looking at, or any other aspects of the business that kind of on your radar screen or on the top of your priority list?
I mean, I think for me, it's interesting to see how the Olympics unfold and to see kind of the excitement that happens from that, and then what happens after that, right? I think hopefully there's a direct correlation to the second half of the WNBA season, and it just keeps going from a viewership perspective, keeps going from an attendance perspective. Now, those are the really big things that I'm looking forward to is kind of what the next 12, 18, 24 months look like. I think we're very much in that hockey stick growth period. And for us as an overall, league, teams, business, et cetera, women's sports needs to continue that rise because they should have had this start 10, 15, 20 years ago. But they're at that, kind of crux to where, okay, what does the next 2 years look like? Because they're going to be extremely influential of the overall life cycle of women's sports. So really figuring out, okay, how do we all kind of help each other along the way, I think is super important because at the end of the day, we're all in this together. I think everybody that works at WNBA, NWSL property understands we're all in this to kind of see what the future can be created from a women's sports perspective. And we're all aligned in the same way. And I think that's really, in my opinion, and I know I'm, saying it probably over and over again here on this, but I mean, I think that's where the most important thing for me. I wanted to jump onto this journey to see what can happen from a women's sports perspective and the impact you can have on a men's team. You don't have as much impact as you have on the women's side individually, right?
Right.
Like as an organization where 40, 45 from an NBA brother, and you're talking a couple hundred people, right? So like the amount of impact that you can have on this side of things is significant. And we try to echo that here internally is, we are strong but mighty. And I think our industry is strong but mighty at the same time. And I think I'm really interested to see the next 2 years. I think that's going to be very telling of where the industry goes as a whole and what our capacity is for the next 10 years.
You said it right. I mean, this is such a critical and fascinating time to be in a role like yours and just and be involved in these types of partnerships and just the whole growth of women's sports. So it's
The
a
only thing I'd say to end it is, I think the other piece that has been super successful here is all of our departments talk. And I think that has really been a piece that I think we echo as a group is working together from a partnership standpoint. I think I mentioned it before, but they work with everybody across the organization. So making sure that, social and partnerships are aligned, marketing and social are aligned, community and social, but also from a ticketing standpoint, marketing and community is kind of what drives ticketing engagement. So I think, you know, as more as we all work together in this, again, that's the same thing across the league, but also across your own organization, I think is super important. And we have direct dialogue with folks all the time here. And that because you mentioned culture. And I think that's the biggest piece is continuing the culture that all these teams have built to get to where we are today is extremely important over that next 2, 5, 10-year time period.
It's critical. I mean, if you've got a culture where there are walls or things are siloed and there's not that kind of communication, again, looking at it from a brand partner perspective, that's not an organization I'm going to be thrilled to work with, right? I'm going to have to do a lot more work and things, and maybe I'm not even going to get some of the things that I need in an organization like that. So 100% absolutely critical. And you mentioned too, and when you were talking about being curious and asking questions, I used to advise folks when I was part of a larger organization, like, yes, I used to use the phrase be a sponge, right? Soak up all of the information. And that meant don't just ask one person that question, ask that same question to 3 or 4 different people in different areas of the organization, because you're going to get different answers and you're going to learn 3 times or 4 times as much by just talking to one. So yeah, that kind of cross-departmental communications and information sharing, absolutely, absolutely important. Jason, this has been great. We'll pick it up at another time. Wish you nothing but the best for the rest of the season, and just want to say thanks for taking the time today.
Perfect, Jim. Hopefully, I get to catch you when I'm back in Chicago for an Aces Sky game.
Yeah, let's do it. Love it. All right. And on behalf of Ticket Manager, I want to thank all of you for watching and listening, and remind you to please join us for the next episode in the All Access interview series.